Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Last Week I Saw, where I just talk about the movies and TV shows I saw the previous week. Yeah, let's just jump into it. That's all I gotta say. Guys, whatever you saw last week, comment down below. I want to have a discussion with you guys. I'm gonna be replying to your comments. Alright, so 2 movies, 1 TV show, docuseries. Let's talk about them. The first thing I saw last week was a movie in the theater called X. X is about a crew of filmmakers that go to this cabin, not really a cabin, this rented farm, and turns out the people renting the farms are kind of creepy, and they're trying to film this pornographic film in the middle of this barn, and they're constantly under the threat of these creepy landlords. The movie stars no one I really know, except Kid Cudi. I'm a big fan of Kid Cudi's music. And the film was directed by someone I wasn't too familiar with. However, this is an A24 movie. As you guys know, I kind of have a hard-on for A24, which is the reason why I decided to watch this movie. It's been a while since I saw an A24 horror movie in the cinema, so I decided to go watch it. And to be honest, I'm a bit on the fence about it. It's actually A24's most accessible horror film. And I think that's what I didn't like about it. It felt very traditional horror. It felt very of the 70s. Like I said, it's about this camera crew, this film crew that are trying to create this pornographic film. So it has a very 70s exploitation kind of vibe to it. The movie starts and it kind of felt like, it reminded me a lot of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Just the whole feel of them driving up to the middle of nowhere and they're in this kind of Volkswagen Type 2 kind of vehicle, and it felt very 70s, like smoking weed in the car and all that stuff. Very reminiscent of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and once they get to the cabin, obviously kind of strays away. It's not all that similar to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And the thing I didn't like about this movie is that it's A24 at some parts. There's this really great sequence with a crocodile early on in the film, where this girl is swimming and you just get this beautiful aerial shot of the girl swimming and a crocodile's creeping towards her. Those are like some very A24 horror movie moments. Then there's some other moments that feel like Blumhouse. It almost felt like this movie was produced by A24 and halfway through they just passed the baton to Blumhouse. There were some moments with very cheap jump scares, some moments where the acting was questionable. Unfortunately, some of that acting came from Kid Cudi. Some of the acting, too, from, I don't know the actor's name, but he kind of looks like B-rate Matthew McConaughey. His acting was a little questionable as well. So, and the first half of the movie is very slow, and the second half of the movie is where stuff starts picking up. And I was way more a fan of the second half of the movie. Despite those Blumhousey moments that kind of irritated me, at least there was like a lot of blood and guts and gore, and that's when it really felt like a 70s movie. The beginning was kind of meandering. This could have been easily shaved down by a half an hour, just undo like a lot of that first half. So overall, it wasn't unenjoyable. There were some really gruesome kills, which I like, some great comedic moments. It's a horror comedy, but the comedy doesn't stray away from the horror. Like, when the comedy occurs, it doesn't, like, relieve the film of all tension. So at least I had that going for it. But, yeah, that's about it I can say about the movie. It was quite forgettable, unfortunately. So, the movie X, it's about I'd say a 6 out of 10 for me. The next thing I saw is the documentary Bad Vegan. It has, like, a longer title, but I just remember Bad Vegan. Bad Vegan, what that was basically about, it was about this girl who runs, it's a documentary, so it's a true story. So she had this vegan restaurant in the middle of New York, and it was this very famous vegan restaurant. People like Alec Baldwin and Owen Wilson used to attend this vegan restaurant, and all of a sudden she gets caught up in an abusive relationship, and as that unfolds, her restaurant starts to go chaotic. This one was a bit more of a misfire for me, unfortunately. First of all, this didn't need to be a 4-episode docuseries, each episode running at about 45 minutes. This could have been shaved down to 2 hours total. There's a lot of fluff in there. There was like a part where they're talking like, it really felt like very hippie And it's the kind of culture I don't really like. Don't get me wrong, I'm accepting towards all cultures, but that kind of like hippie, urban, white girl culture is just so like, to me. And the movie doesn't really have a tongue-in-cheek approach to it. They take it very seriously, and they're all like, oh yeah, ooh, this and that and this, and they're talking about like mysticism at some point. I'm like, that totally doesn't fit in the documentary. Just cut all this out. There's parts in there where it felt like they were making a big deal out of something that wasn't that big a deal. Don't get me wrong, the events in this documentary are pretty tragic ultimately. There are some moments where like, wait, you don't know about the meat suit? You don't know about the meat? Oh, you gotta tell them about the meat suit. The meat suit? The meat? And I'm like, okay, let's just fucking get to it already. What's the meat suit? Yeah, a lot of moments like that where it just felt like a lot of fluff. I ultimately think the subject of the documentary was pretty interesting. And I think it's a pretty fascinating story. When I saw the title, I thought it was going to be about like some crime, like a murder or something. I don't really like murder movies just because it's overdone. But this was interesting because it kind of felt like that, but it was about an abusive relationship that's kind of really fucked up. And yeah, that's the interesting part of it, is like kind of the Stockholm Syndrome thing going on. But everything else surrounding it was kind of annoying. One of the people in the documentary was a journalist for Vanity Fair, and whenever he was on screen, I'm like, oh my god, here we go. And he's like, he really sounded like some pretentious film school student who's just like, oh yeah, this is what happened, and this is what it meant, and this character did this, and it's like, dude, just take it down a notch. Whenever the camera was on the lead woman, that was fine. And whenever it was on her friends and family and coworkers, that was all fine. Alec Baldwin plays a pretty hefty part in this documentary, and it kind of goes nowhere. In the first episode, we find out that her husband is introduced through Alec Baldwin. And that right there, you're like, what the fuck? And it turns out that's the husband that ended up being abusive. But anyway, and it kind of just goes nowhere after that. They never say Alec Baldwin ever again. They're just like, oh yeah, she had a thing with Alec Baldwin and it didn't work out, and then she saw this on Alec Baldwin's Twitter and she got introduced, and it's just like, oh, what happened to Alec? Why is Alec Baldwin friends with this guy in the first place? This Alec Baldwin guy is such a fucking meme is what I'm getting at. This guy is so crazy. He goes around sets, shoots people, he's friends with creeps, then he goes on SNL and does a Donald Trump impression like nothing happened. He's an international man of mystery. Fuck, can we just get an Alec Baldwin documentary instead of a bad vegan documentary? What about bad actor? He's not really a bad actor. I'd say he's mid-tier. He was good in The Departed. What am I talking about? I'm supposed to be talking about Bad Vegan, but this movie was so forgettable that I can't even remember it, so it is what it is. Went on too long, a lot of repetition, a lot of fluff, a lot of embellishment. Though it did have a good core story to it, I just wished it was presented in a better docuseries. Alright, finally I watched Drive My Car. And this is a Japanese movie. It's currently nominated for the Oscars. And the reason why I watched Drive My Car is because I want to be all up to date with the Oscars. So I decided to give it a watch. It's kind of become a trend at the Oscars to nominate an Asian movie. You know, back in the day, it was kind of rare when a foreign language film would get nominated for an Oscar, for Best Picture, that is. But it's becoming more and more common now. But yeah, a few years ago, we got Parasite, which won Best Picture, and it was a fabulous movie. Definitely top 3 of that year for me. It was a great movie, and it kept me on the edge of my seat the whole time. Last year, Minari was nominated. Minari was my favorite movie of last year. That movie fucking slapped. What about Drive My Car? Well, Drive My Car, it's about a guy whose wife passes away. His wife was a screenwriter, he's an actor, and he is trying to put on this play, and the play is kind of being a little hectic. If you look at what the story is about on IMDb, they say the story is about a man's relationship with his driver, and that's partially true. There's so much more going on. Actually, that whole driver relationship that goes on probably starts happening halfway through the film. Overall, this movie is a bit of a mixed bag for me. It's a very long movie. 3 hours long. Alright, impress me. I had to take a toilet break in the middle, but it just goes in so many different directions. I just didn't know really what to think of it. The first half hour is building up this man's relationship with his wife. And then that half hour happens, and I don't think I'm spoiling the movie, but the wife dies, and then opening credits happen. So you're having the opening credits at the half an hour mark. Kind of a strange thing, not uncommon, but I've seen very few movies pull it off. One movie that comes to mind is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. But yeah, just like that very extended prelude to the film. And I feel like that prelude, although I did enjoy it, it kind of didn't need to be in the movie, because all the information that's told in that prologue, it's kind of repeated throughout the movie. So if you could have just made this a 2.5-hour movie. And other than that, just a lot of staring, a lot of shots of the city, a lot of landscapes. Very, very slow movie. And don't get me wrong, I don't mind a slow movie. It's just this movie, a slow movie just has to have something else going on underneath it. And I feel like this movie's story is pretty simplistic. It's about a man's relationship with his driver. He's trying to put on a play. It didn't need to be as stretched out. It didn't need to have those moments of reflection, those moments of looking at landscapes and thinking about what you just saw. It didn't feel as merited to me. So this movie ultimately was so long and so difficult to get through. That's not to say everything in the movie is bad. It's an ambitious movie. It just kind of didn't work for me. The things I did like about the movie, there's a whole subplot surrounding how the wife after sex would get ideas for screenplays, and that comes into play later on in the film. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, an interesting reveal occurs surrounding around that, and I feel like that was the most interesting part of the film. Where the film chooses to stop, like when we see the final production of the play, fantastic. Just one long shot that just lingers on the two characters. That, like, up to that point, I was like, this movie's kind of losing me. It's kind of all over the place. But when that happened, I was like, that was fucking beautiful. There you go. And ultimately, I thought the most interesting character in this movie was the driver. But misleading title, it's not really, she's not in the movie all that much. But when she is there, she kind of steals the show to me. A lot of scenes. I think another thing you could have cut out completely, there's so many scenes of rehearsing. And I get that sometimes the themes of this screenplay kind of like carry over to the film. But I feel like a lot of that could have been cut out. It felt very long and it was like exhausting after a while. Sometimes when I watch these movies too, language barrier kind of occurs. That's kind of rare though. I kind of watch foreign movies all the time. Just this movie felt a little slow to me. Felt a little meandering. I kind of wish the main character had a bit more drive in what he was doing. I wish there was a bit more of a sense of urgency. Maybe a few scenes of this director, like, okay, this is not going to work. We need to, like, let's do it, you know? Just some kind of sense of urgency, something to kind of, like, drive the story forward, some kind of engine. I think that's what was missing in the movie for me. Yeah. But overall, like, somewhere in there's a very good 2-hour movie. It's just, it was very long. And I don't mind long movies. One of my favorite movies of all time is Once Upon a Time in America, the director's cut. That's a 4-hour long movie. I feel like a movie like that, epic movies, big stories kind of lend themselves well to a long runtime. But a movie about a man's relationship with his driver doesn't merit a 3-hour runtime to me. Even though there's a lot more going on, I feel like it could have shaved down to a 2-hour movie. Yeah, so unfortunately, it doesn't. This week, not as much of an amazing movie. Last week, I talked about Andromeda Strain and Gospel According to St. Matthew, which I enjoyed a lot. This week, I kind of watched fewer things, and what I did watch wasn't as impressive. But guys, comment below, what have you watched last week? Have you watched the movies I'm talking about? I want to hear your thoughts down below, and I'll catch you next week when I talk about the movies I see this week.